Hi, everybody. So, like Joe said, we made this filmmaking guide to help you process and understand the entire filmmaking process a little bit better. So we have a lot of tips and tricks that we're going to go through. It is a lot of information, so please do take notes. And during the question periods, you can always tell me to go back and explain something again, or even to slow down if you think I should. We've also updated the guide that your teachers have, so we will be sending that out hopefully later on this week, along with these PowerPoints with all the notes. So everything that I'm saying right now, your teachers will have. Those are our pictures. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. So the first thing that you'll see on this slide is the rubric, and this is on page 24 of the guide, and it's basically going through all the different criteria and standards that we look for when judging the best film. So I put this as the first slide I want to show you because I want it to be the first thing you look at and go through before starting the entire filmmaking process. So make sure you give it a read through. You'll have it on this PowerPoint as well as on the guide. So now this is the table of contents of the guide, and I just want to break it down for you quickly. In the beginning, there's an introduction, and then filmmaking itself is broken down into 3 parts. There's planning, executing, and post-production, which is basically editing. And finally, we have the rubrics. And I'll be going through all of this with you guys today. So it is, again, a lot of information, but please tell me to stop if you need me to, and take notes, ask me questions, and we'll try to help you as best as we can. So the first thing that the guide talks about is collaboration. So an action project itself requires meaningful engagement of all students throughout the entire process. This means there are a lot of people working on this one project, and you can choose to work as a whole classroom or separate into small groups if you want. We do recommend a minimum of 7 people per group, but 8 or 10 will work just as well. And this is totally up to you and your teacher to decide. So there are multiple roles you can play during the project. And within filmmaking, there's a lot of different roles you can play, and multiple people can take on the same role. So some roles I've listed here includes being a scriptwriter or a storyboarder, being a director, being a camera operator, being a production assistant, a host or speaker in front of the camera, or being an editor. So like I said, some of these tasks may require you to have more than one person in that role, and that's because the work you have to do is a lot. So being a scriptwriter or a storyboarder requires multiple people to come in with their creative ideas and figure out what the vision for your video is. Same thing with editing. It's a lot of work. It requires multiple people, and with all their creativity coming together, that's how the video is going to become a success. And don't worry, like every single role I consider is very important, and collaboration and communication is what's going to make the entire project work. So now we're going to dive into planning. Planning is the first and the most important part of filmmaking. At this point, you're deciding how you want to translate your action project into a video. So I would want you to ask yourself at this point, how do you want your audience to feel? And what should their biggest takeaways be when they watch your video? So for example, in the beginning, when they watch your video, you might want them to feel surprised. Later on, you're going to want them to be inspired or motivated. So you have to think about these questions. Once you have your answers, once you have these goals in place, you're going to need to break down your video and plan out the scenes. So this is a great point at which you can write out your script with all the dialogue and the information you want to convey in the video. You don't have to have a super detailed script, but wherever there's going to be dialogue or you're going to be recording, let's say, a voiceover, make sure you've written out your lines beforehand and you've practiced it and rehearsed it. Another really great tool to use is a storyboard. So what storyboarding is an outline using pictures and brief notes of the scenes you'll be filming. So it's basically very simply just a few boxes for each scene that you're filming, and underneath each box you can write out specific equipment you might need or how you want the shot to be framed. And if we go to the next slide, within storyboarding, what it helps you do is create a list of your filming needs. So like I said, underneath each box on your storyboard, you can write out not only how you want your scene to be framed, but also any sort of filming equipment or needs that you have, just so that you can keep it in mind when you do go out to film. So this again could include equipment, so your camera or lights or objects, props, and also the people, the characters or the actors, whatever you want within that scene. I also want to go through some framing techniques, and these are techniques you should think about when you do create your storyboard, because they'll help you understand how you want your video to look and what creative techniques you can use to make it look the best. So 3 techniques are rule of thirds, headroom, and focus. We also have a video that I linked in the guide, and it expands on these techniques and also lists a few more. So if we go on the next slide, we have the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds refers to grid lines on a camera that create 9 boxes. And the rule here is that footage tends to look better when the main subject or object is placed either along these lines or at the 4 points where the lines intersect. So where you can see the red dots. So here we have an example. On the left side, the photographer didn't follow the rule of thirds, and on the right side, they did. And it can just help your video look a little bit more visually appealing. Now the next slide, this is headroom. So it is pretty self-explanatory. It just means to watch out for the headspace you're giving your subject when filming. You have to make sure that you don't cut off part of their head or part of their limb in any sort of awkward way, unless you're purposely and creatively filming a close-up of their face. The next slide. Next is focus. So the focus on your camera can help you put the most important subject or object in focus while having the surroundings blurred, so that your audience realizes what they should be paying attention to. Again, this is just artistically using focus, because in the before you'll see everything's in focus, but there's no one specific thing that your audience has to pay attention to. They could be looking at the trees or the lake, but in the after, when you have only the girl in focus, the audience knows to pay attention to the girl and think about what is she feeling, what is she looking at or paying attention to. Okay, so that was it for planning. Does anybody have any specific questions on planning? Yes, we can.
Hi.
Hi.
Me? Okay. One of our students was asking, what type of video editing software do you recommend for them to be using?
Mm-hmm. So as I'm going to be going through post-production, and in that I'll have a list of video editing software that you guys can use, and it's also included in the guide. I don't think I go through exactly what video editing software there is in the PowerPoint, but within the guide I've listed a few like free video editing softwares and some audio editing software that you can use.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else?
Okay, good.
Awesome, thank you. So now we're going to talk about executing. So this is where you're going to bring your plan to life. And at this point, don't worry if you don't have any fancy equipment. You can easily use your smartphone or a tablet and work with the resources you do have to produce high quality videos. So some tools you can use are your smartphone, tablet, if you have a camera or a microphone. Now, what I really want to emphasize is that filming is definitely not just about the visuals. It's also about the audio. Audio plays a major role in conveying the content of your video to your audience. Because when something doesn't sound right, your audience isn't going to care how beautiful the video looks, because they'll be distracted by the fact that they can't make out what's being said. So for audio, the best practice is always to prepare to capture good audio rather than thinking you can fix a bad audio in the editing process, because it's pretty difficult to separate overlapping noise from your desired audio. So when you are choosing a location to film at, I want you to be aware of your surroundings. Are you in a noisy area? Is there a lot of wind? Are there kids playing near you or construction happening near you? You just need to be aware of all of that when deciding on a location to film. And this isn't to say don't go outdoors. We definitely encourage you and want you to go outside and film outside. Just be aware of the weather that day and who's around you. Next slide. Okay, so in this slide, I'm going to go through some tips on how you can capture great audio. So one tip we have is that whenever you're filming, it's better to use an external microphone. So an external microphone placed close to the subject is always going to pick up better audio than the mic on the video recording device you use. Now, if you don't have an actual microphone, you can just as easily use a smartphone's microphone or a recording device as your external microphone. So put that close to the subject, whoever's talking, record the audio on that smartphone or recording device, and later on sync that audio to your video. Another recommendation we have is to use a windscreen to cover your microphone. Now, windscreens are basically microphone covers made of fake fur or foam, and they help minimize the background noise of wind. You can easily make one yourself, and we provided some videos and articles in the updated guide on creating your own windscreens, and also we added some videos on using external microphones. Another tip we have is that you can also record a voiceover. Recording voiceovers is a great idea if it's super windy outside, but there's a scene you really want to film. You can film that scene, then come back inside, record a voiceover in a quiet area, and then later on insert that onto the outdoor scenes you filmed. While you are outside, you might actually want to purposely film some of the background noise. So you might want to film the sound of a river or babbling brook, raindrops, or a bird song, because you can use these later on creatively to match your shots and enhance the sound. Another thing that I want to mention is that whenever you do record audio, whether that's indoors or outdoors, make sure that you play your audio back to check the quality. Because somebody might be speaking and you might not realize, oh, there's kids in the background, oh, there's some wind or some bird singing, and they're covering up the person's audio. So make sure whenever you do record them, play it back right away, just so that you can be sure you've accounted for everything around you. Now, we did get a lot of questions on how you can edit audio and improve its quality. So there is an editing audio software that I think is pretty easy to use, and it's free to download. We put the link to download it in the guide. It's called Audacity. So we shared the video download link, and we also shared an article for tips on how to edit using Audacity. One of the specific questions we got was, how can you level out the audio? So one way you can do that is to use a video effect called compression or compressor, and that's an audio effect that you can find in Audacity. You just go to the effects tab and click compressor. And what it basically does is it gets the loudest parts of your audio and the quietest parts of your audio and brings them closer together, so they're a little bit more leveled. And I've included a few more audio editing tips within the slide, but I think that's something that your teacher can go through. If you want me to go through it, I would gladly do so, and we can do that in the questions part. So just let me know. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about using your phone. So your phone or your tablet, whatever camera you decide to use, it should have settings that you can adjust to get the best footage based on your environment. For example, you might be able to change the amount of light coming into the camera, so how bright your video looks, or you can even add a filter to change the color tone. It depends on the kind of look you're going for. A very important point to remember is to make sure your phone or tablet is turned horizontally when filming, so that your footage is taken in landscape. This is to ensure that when you upload your video to your computer, the video will take up the full screen. Because if you film in portrait mode and then you upload it to your computer, it's just going to take up a small portion of the middle of the screen with black bars on either side. And that's not going to look very good, and it's going to be a little difficult for you to work with. We've also included in the guide a link to a YouTube video that shows you how you can DIY phone tripods if that's something that you might be interested in. Next slide. So another important aspect of executing is lighting. So to make sure the subject that you're filming stays well lit, you have to make sure the source of your light is coming from someplace behind the camera. Now, if you don't have actual lights to use, you can always film during the daytime and take advantage of sunlight. Another important thing to keep in mind while filming is to actively use filming techniques, as this can help your footage become that much more visually appealing. So some filming techniques you might want to use include tilting, panning, and sliding. So tilting is a technique where the camera stays in a fixed position, but it rotates up and down in a vertical plane, kind of like how your head moves when you nod up and down. Panning is a technique where the camera stays in a fixed position, but rotates from side to side on a horizontal plane. So again, this is like how your head moves if you were to look from side to side. Sliding is a technique where the entire camera moves from one side to another along a straight line. These might sound pretty simple, but when you use them actively while you're filming, it can help your footage look a little bit more professional. We've also included a YouTube video that shows you a more visual example on these techniques. So that's in the guide again. Next. Okay, so next we'll talk about stop motion animation. So this describes animation created by physically manipulating real-world objects and photographing them one frame of the video at a time to create the illusion of movement. Your objects that you choose to film or take pictures of might be made out of clay, Legos, they might be paper cutouts, or puppets. So what you basically have to do is take a picture of them with each movement you have them make, and when you string your pictures together, in the end, it'll look like you captured a video of your object moving. And for stop motion animation, all you need to prepare is the objects you'll be filming, the background set, lights, and a camera. Next slide. So I'm just going to give you some tips on how you can capture the best stop motion animation. The first tip is to use a stationary camera. And you want to do this so that the framing of your object won't change each time you take a picture. You can place your camera on a tripod or prop it up on a shelf facing the objects. Another thing is that you want the lighting to be as consistent as possible so that your pictures will connect as smoothly as possible. Therefore, it's better to use indoor lighting because you can control indoor lighting as opposed to using sunlight. Because as you're taking pictures, time will pass and the sunlight intensity can change or clouds might come and cover the sunlight. So it's always better to use indoor lighting. It's also helpful to have your camera settings be set to manual. Specifically, you might have settings called ISO or aperture, and these affect the lighting of your pictures. So you want to make sure they're not set to automatic, because if they are set to automatic, this means that the final product may vary from shot to shot because the camera will be choosing the best settings every time you take a picture. It's also good to consider the frame rate. Now, frame rate is measured as frames per second. To understand this a little bit better, you can replace the word frames with pictures. So ask yourself, how many pictures do I want to take to cover 1 second of footage? And when you're thinking about that question, it'll help you realize how much you want to move your object between pictures. So ideally, you'll want to have 10 to 12 pictures for 1 second of video. So you can always play around with that. You can have 6 pictures per second of video. That's fine too. It just depends on the kind of look you're going for. Next slide. Okay, now green screen. This is a pretty cool technique, and it honestly doesn't need to cost a ton of money or be super complicated. Now, if you don't exactly know what a green screen is or does, it is physically a green screen, but it also refers to the actual video editing technique that's used to layer 2 images or video streams over each other based on color. So this means you can remove the background of a video if it's all one color, usually green. So next slide. What you need to film on a green screen is the set, and the set includes a large green background, some lights, and a stationary camera. Now you can make the large green background yourself by sticking pieces of bright green matte paper on a wall, so not shiny, or get a large piece of bright green cloth and hang that on a wall, or you can also paint a poster board green. So lighting for a green screen is pretty important. The goal of your lighting is to have the green screen evenly lit and the subject you're filming to be lit separately in a way that avoids creating shadows on the green screen. The best practice is to have 2 lights on the green screen, one on either side, And the subject should be lit with 3 lights, 2 facing the subject from both sides and 1 lighting the subject from the back. So I know this is asking for a lot of lights, and you definitely don't need to have all of them. This is just the best practice. What you should really be thinking about with lighting is just to try to get your green screen as evenly lit as possible and to avoid creating shadows on the green screen. And the last thing is to make sure your camera is stationary. Again, like always, you want the camera to be stationary so that the lighting and the framing of your footage is consistent. Next slide. Now, some tips for using for filming on a green screen. So one way that you can avoid shadows is to keep your subject as far away from the green screen as possible. And the reason I keep emphasizing that you should avoid shadows is because they add darker shades to the green screen. So when you're filming and you upload the footage, you'll see that the background's no longer one consistent color because there's shadows that keep moving around on the green screen. And this will just make it a little more difficult to edit out the background. Some more things to keep in mind is not to wear green or anything with green tones. If you wear a green shirt and film in green screen and then you go to edit it, the green on your shirt will disappear too, and you might end up looking like a floating head. And unless you're creatively trying to do that, it's not the best idea. Another thing is to not wear reflective material because again, that might reflect the green from your surroundings. You also want to make sure that the camera frames the shot so that the green screen takes up the entire background and the subject that you're filming stays within the frame. So all their limbs, their hands, all their movements that they're making should stay within the green screen. And again, that's just so that when you edit, you're not going to be facing any problems with their hands being outside of the green screen and that background not being green, and thus you not being able to edit it out. Next slide. So when it comes to actually editing your green screen, what it requires is for you to use a video effect. And this video effect should be included in any video editing software that you use. It often goes by the name of chroma key filter. It might also simply be called green screen. Now, if you can't find this video effect under the video effects tab in the software you're using, it's possible that it might be under a different name. And for that, you can do a quick Google search of your video editing software and then just write green screen editing beside that. If you're having trouble though finding that effect, we did provide some links to some softwares that do have green screen editing capabilities within the guide. And that's on page 18 of the guide. So if you want, you can always download that. They're free and use that to edit your green screen. But when you do apply this video effect to your video, what it allows you to do is to remove parts of the video that are a certain color. So you would choose to remove the bright green color of the green screen. And once that green background is gone, you should be able to replace it with any image or video that you do want as your background. Next slide. Okay, so that was executing. That was a lot of information. But do you have any questions?
We don't have any questions. You have a question, Michelle?
Yeah. Say you don't have attachments like microphones, not like your hand up. Microphones or any equipment like other things that you have. Is it okay if you just microphone that is? It's not really
Can we get the question repeated, or you can come up?
Okay, is it my question?
Yeah.
Okay, so what he's asking is if we don't have things like microphones to attach, is it okay to use the audio from your own device, like say your iPod or your phone? Is that your question? Yeah, is that audio going to be good enough, do you think?
You could use it. I would suggest to play it back to see what the audio is like. If you could get like another smartphone, say if you have one you record on and one you can record the audio, that's always better. But you could still, of course, use it and then later on try to edit it. So that's up to your discretion. So when you're filming, you know what surroundings, what you have in your surroundings, if there's wind or kids are playing. I would love for you to actually listen to the audio after you record it That'll help you figure out if the audio is good enough. And if not, see if you can get another smartphone just to record the audio on. But if worse comes to worse, you can definitely use that audio and later on edit it using Audacity.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay, we have another question from
Yes. Which one?
Kala.
How long should a video be?
The video should be 4 minutes long plus credits. And I'll mention that again at the end.
So one thing that I want to add, so if you don't have your own microphone, you can easily use your microphone that's attached to your earphones. A lot of earphones or headphones have their own microphones now. Another strategy that you can use if the audio is not clear enough is you can actually do a voiceover instead. So that could be a strategy that you can use. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Maham if we don't have any more questions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Joe. So we'll get started on post-production. Okay, so like I mentioned in the beginning, post-production is basically editing. So after you're done with all of your filming, you're gonna have a bunch of footage to work with, and this is when you're gonna start with the whole editing process. Now, what editing helps you do is cut out the footage you don't need, add in voiceovers, piece together scenes, add in images or other audio. You can add effects, title slides, credit slides, and much more. What editing helps you do, besides all those technical things, is it helps you manipulate the feeling or the vibe of your video. So based on the music you choose or the way you've cut your footage or the kinds of imagery you're using, you can make your video look exciting or dramatic. It can look calm, scary, or uplifting. That power is in your hands when you're editing. So that's why it's really important to focus on the story you're trying to convey and the initial vision or goal you had for your video, and match the way you edit to that. The first thing you have to do with editing is to pick a video editing software to work with. Now, if you aren't familiar with video editing software, it can definitely be a little bit intimidating, but once you get going, you're gonna find that this is the most fun part of the whole process. At least that's how I feel. So once you've picked a software, and we've listed the video editing software you can use on page 20 of the guide. We can also email it out separately to the teachers if needed. But once you've picked a software, it's a good idea to search for an introductory editing guide on YouTube for your specific software so that you can get an idea of the interface and features. You should also take some time to play around with the different tools and make sure you're comfortable with the layout of the software first before diving into editing your video. The next slide. So some basic editing tools that I want to go through. These tools should be the same within all editing softwares. Their names might be slightly different, but these are some basic tools. So first one's importing. This is what you call uploading your footage into the software from your desktop or documents. There's cutting or trimming. This is how you cut your footage, break it down into smaller parts, or delete some of that footage. Video and audio transitions are effects that you can add between two clips to help them move smoothly from one clip to another. So for example, you might fade in from one video clip to another. You might fade out of one. You might also have audio gain, which is an audio transition, and it'll help kind of level out the audio from one clip to another. There's also video and audio effects, and these are video or audio effects that you can put on an entire video. So for example, this could be a video effect that changes the coloring of a video. And exporting is when you convert your project file to an MP4, because when you're working on your video editing software, it's not a video yet. You have to export it, and we'd like you to choose the MP4 type of file when you're exporting, and then it'll be a video that you can share and upload anywhere. So next. So in the guide, we've provided links to a bunch of external resources that can help you with the editing process. As I mentioned before, we have free video editing software listed on page 20 of the guide. We also have websites where you can find royalty-free images and music or audio clips, and that's listed on page 22. One thing that I do really want to emphasize is that it's very important for you to give credit to the resources you use if they ask for credit to be given. Because these websites put in a lot of effort to bring together a bunch of really cool images and really cool audio clips and music and have them available to you for free. So just give them credit at the end when you're creating your credit slide. And the next slide. And these are just some tips. So we had the question earlier. Your video shouldn't be more than 4 minutes long, plus the credits. We'd also like you to mention that this is a Water Docs at School project. Thank Learning for a Sustainable Future and Ecologos. Make sure to include 3 logos, one of Ecologos, one of Learning for a Sustainable Future, and one for Water Docs at School Action Projects Program. And these logos should be with your teachers. And also, again, I want to emphasize, just as I did in the beginning when we started this session, is to check the rubric on page 24 of the guide and go through it to make sure you're meeting all the criteria and standards listed over there. Next slide. This is pretty much it. Good luck to you guys. Have fun. And remember, we are here to help. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to Bob from Ecologos or Joe from LSF. Their emails are listed here, and the teachers also have the emails. So any questions as we end?
Questions? No? How do we download the guide?
We're good.
Yeah, I know it was a lot of information. Thank you for being patient and listening through it all.
You want to clap?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.